Good afternoon. I know this is a little bit later than usual. So this week is a double Parsha, Netzavim, VaYelech, and I've entitled it A Different Type of Rock Concert. Now, just a few announcements first. Number one, in this double Parsha, Moshe is leaving the people. We're hearing people are hearing kind of the last great ideas and concepts and what have you. So just trying to get into that mode. And it's interesting that the song of Hazinu will come next. That comes on Shabbat Shuvah between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which leads me to three of the four following Shabbatot after this week are Chagim. So there will be no Parsha Shir next week. Then it will be Hazinu, and then there will be no Parsha discussion for 2 weeks for Sukkot or Shmini Atzeret Simchat Torah, and then V'zot HaBracha we'll talk a little bit about and go back to Bereshit, the beginning of the cycle. For next year, beginning with this cycle of Bereshit, I'm going to focus on choosing pieces of the Parsha and pieces of the Haftarah that fit together to show us some basic concepts or elements of Judaic thinking when we talk about different things that happen and how do we put them together. So that will be the focus for 5784. Okay, now, I promise I am not going to test you, or I do not expect you to remember, but last year, for this Parsha, Netzavim and VaYelech, Netzavim specifically, I spoke about the diversity of the crowd, and you can see that. You can get that from the archives if you want to hear that Parsha discussion again. That is represented here in our Parsha. And the potential for dissension and the need to address that while recognizing and including the full spectrum of diversity represented in our communities. This year, I would like to focus on the exact opposite dimension that we can find here, that of crowd personality and unity. My husband Ken and I love to go to rock concerts, although I must admit I'm still recovering from the excessive loudness of the Bruce Springsteen concert we just went to last week. Take earplugs. And he should have it refuah shlema. He is not doing concerts right now due to illness. We have gone to Santana, Billy Joel, Christopher Cross, members of the Moody Blues, Earth, Wind, and Fire, many other bands through the last months, through the last years. For 3 or 4 hours while we are there, we are part of a community that transcends educational levels, socioeconomic classes to an extent. You have to have money to buy the tickets, clearly, but you've got the nosebleed seats and you've got the seats that are right up front. Religion, race, gender, sexuality, nationality, etc., etc., etc. We're all there for the music and the message it conveys. The same things happen at sports gathering, where everybody is this community, although there are separate teams to cheer for, which is a different dynamic, which is why I chose to use the rock concert as my dugma, as my metaphor. We are brought together as a unified whole, sometimes with everyone rising to their feet and standing and dancing together and forming this bond that we all share through this experience. Netzavim, we are standing. We are almost frozen in time on our feet. Remember, Netzavim is different than Omdim. Omdim, you move. Netzavim, you stand at attention. In acknowledgement of so much that is problematic with our world, increasingly the musicians and artists that we love best also infuse their performances with very important messages of social justice, caring about each other, and healing our world. These messages are also conveyed by my favorite Israeli artists, including David Do'or, Yossi Azalai, and Idan Rachel, among others. Music is the vehicle. The community it creates is the message and the experience. Now, let us consider a different type of rock concert, if you will. Let's look at our Parsha. Atem Netzavim hayom kolochem lifnei Hashem Elokechem Roshechem Shiftechem Ziknechem V'Shodrechem Kol Ish Yisrael. Here you are, all standing at attention here before God, your rock star, your heads, your tribes, your elders, your officers, every person of Israel. Tapchem, Yishechem, Gerecha Asher B'Kerev Nechanecha, Michotav Atzecha Ad Sha'av Mimecha. Your children, your wives, even the stranger within your camp, from the one who chops wood to the one who draws water. In other words, all of you are part of this community. And the community benefits in turn from the presence of all. Someone told us that Billy Joel does not intentionally sell the tickets in the first rows of his concert, nor does he give them to family and friends. Instead, he pulls people from those nosebleed seats I spoke about, who are true fans and may not be able to afford anything else, and randomly puts them in these seats. I like to think of this as his Jewish values in action, and hope that his cousin Richard Joel is proud of that. We continue. You are all standing here, to enter into the covenant of the Lord your God, which the Lord your God is concluding with you on this day with its sanctions, so that God may establish you this day as God's people. And to be your God, as God swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I make this covenant with its sanctions, not with you alone. Ki et asher yashnu po imanu omer hayom lifnei Hashem Elokeinu, zot asher enenu po imanu hayom. Even those that are not here with us today are here through your presence. After the concert, of course, everybody asks you, how was it? Once I can hear again and recover from the heat exhaustion from the excessive heat in the air, I try to convey, even to those who were not there, and you bring people into your experience. How do we transmit these messages to future generations? I think of this all the time when we go to concerts we love, where it is not unusual to see 3 generations or even 4 of a family enjoying the experience together. This is generational transmission. This is what we as Jews, members of this entity, vertically and horizontally, are enjoined to do. Parshat Netzavim emphasizes this. Let's turn to Rashi's commentary with some additional thoughts. Nitzavim atem. You are standing in position, matzav, situationally, all of you before the Lord your God, that Moshe assembled them before the presence of the omnipresent on the day of his death, in order to initiate them into a covenant with God and also to provide security for them. Think of lahavdil, but think of, again, metaphorically, not comparatively, of all these musicians, that those of us of certain generations, that these guys have been performing for 50 years. And when they say it's their last concert, or the last time that they're out there, or you think it's the last time you're going to see them, the last song of the last time you're going to see them, think of the emotionality of that. And then multiply that so many times in terms of the impact of the rock concert we're talking about here. The heads of your tribes, your leaders must be present. Your elders, your officials, those that are more prominent. And it goes all the way down, if you will, to the woodcutter and the drawer of water. This teaches us that everyone is important and everyone is to be included. In the Midrash Tanchuma, we read, God has promised this to you and has sworn this to your fathers, not to exchange their descendants for another nation. For this reason, God binds you by these oaths not to provoke God, to anger God, since God could not be separate from you. An agadic explanation, however, is as follows. Why is this section beginning with the words, you are standing this day, put immediately after the tochacha, the list of horrible things that can happen that we read last week in a very quiet voice and as quickly as possible? Because when Israel heard the list of horrible things that can happen if they do not follow instructions, their faces turned pale, They were horrified, and they exclaimed, "Who can possibly stand against you, God?" Therefore Moshe began to calm them. Atem Netzavim, all of you are standing, all of you together, to confirm this brit, so that the tochacha, which was set as a standard of what could happen, as we spoke about a while back, since I did those two parshot together, that would not happen. Or maybe it was last week. I forget which ones I've done that way. Many times you have provoked the omnipresent to anger, and yet God has not made an end to you. But you will continue in God's presence always. And we will amplify that point next time in 2 weeks when we talk about Ha'azinu, which we're going to look at as a love song. The last greatest love song at this rock concert, if you will. I recently finished reading Amos Oz's A Tale of Love and Darkness. In this stream of consciousness and nostalgic memoir, Oz brings the memory and the legacy of the experiences those before him and those who impacted him through his formative years to the pages of his narrative, while showing connections with the trajectory of his life as he moves through it, putting so much of his past behind him, and yet taking its lessons and pivotal points with him. He does here what we all do as we continue practices and traditions that were imprinted upon us by our family's previous generations in earlier years, remembering stories and lessons from those in our lives or earlier and passing these on to our own children. In this way, we keep alive the message and the meaning of so many people and so many important chapters that make us who we are. This is the meaning. V'lo itachem levadchem anochi karet et habrit hazot v'ha'ela hazot. Not only with you am I making this covenant. Notice that in this text we are invoking both our ancestors who were before, we who are here, and the children who are not yet there. Netzavim, you stand together as horizontal community, leaders, heads of tribe, woodcutters, women, children, everyone, regardless of some of the other factors that may take away from the chiyuv of the obligation of people to be part of the gathering. Here, everyone is there. And then the vertical community is invoking the names of our ancestors, noting those who are there and those who will come to be there in the future. This is the meaning of, I make this covenant with all of its sanctions, not with you alone, but also with those who are not here with us today. Just as the first musical numbers at our favorite rock concerts get the crowd on its feet, so to speak, let us take note of the first numbers of this parsha and its content. Now that everyone is acknowledged, both present and future as well, as those who are no longer here, but set our roots in place, we are now told, for you know, and watch the trajectory of this text, because again, we'll talk about it more next time when we talk about the love song and its composition and the different parts that make up a love song. If you can, homework, before then, listen to Billy Joel's Italian Restaurant. Some of you may be laughing. You can laugh. It's okay. And listen to how the song progresses to prepare for Ha'azinu. Here, back in our Parsha, Netzavim, you know that we dwelled in the land of Egypt and how we passed amongst the nations. This is, everyone who's there. These are your past experience. You saw the abominations and their idols. Now, perhaps there's someone amongst you in Netzavim, it says, a man, a woman, a family, or a tribe whose heart strays this day from the Lord, our God, to go and worship the deities of other nations. And I just want to point out one thing. In the trope, there's an emphasis on the word tribe, on shevet. And what that means to me, if I can interpret a little bit and just add a personal comment here, is that just as in the past weeks, we talked about the Ben Sora Mara and the Tochacha and setting something up that we hope doesn't happen, and with the Ben Sora or Mora dividing out what the child does on their own versus when they influence others. Notice it says here, if a man or a woman or a family or a tribe, the tribe is the unit that reflects influence. So that's why we emphasize it in the trope, that will go and worship other deities. Maybe there is a root that produces a hemlock or a wormwood. Then there will be, when such a person hears the words of this oath, he will bless himself in his heart, saying, Shalom yihyeli ki bisrorot libi. I will have peace even if I follow my own heart desire. I will not listen to this. I will not follow God. I will go on my own. Then, v'lo ya'aveh Hashem salach lo ki az ya'ashan af Hashem v'kinato be'ishahu. God will not forgive that person. God's fury, God's zeal will fume against that person, and God will separate him. V'hivdulu Hashem l'ra'ah mikol shivtei Yisrael. And again, back to Shevet. And God will separate that individual or the influential group, if you will, from all of Israel, according to the curses, back to the Tochacha of the Torah scroll. The hidden things belong to the Lord our God, but the revealed things apply to us and our children forever, that we must fulfill the words of this Torah. In verse 28. So Rashi wants us to understand the hidden things clearly. Rashi suggests, wait a minute, are we saying that you, God, will punish an entire community because of the sinful thoughts of an individual? Perhaps there's amongst you a man. But then the focus is on Shevet. So then Rashi teaches about the individual. No man can know the secret thoughts of his fellow, that we could somehow prevent this collective punishment. In answer to this, God says, I will not punish you for the hidden things. I will punish you for the public ones. In other words, once it's a Shevet, once it's a tribe, it is public. Obviously, there's influence. It's parallel to the Ben Sorah Umoreh, the one who is evil and the one who influences others to be evil. A bit later, we are told, and we hear it like an old favorite, for this commandment which I command you this day, ki ha-mitzvah hazot asher anochi mitzavach hayom, lo niflati mimecha v'lo rachakoti. It is not far from you. It is not concealed from you. It is not in heavens. V'lo b'shamayim hi le'mor mi ya'aleh lanu hashamayim v'yikra lanu v'shmama atav v'nasena. Who will go up to the heaven and fetch it for us so that we can hear it, so that it can be told to us and we can fulfill it? And I just want to point out something historically for those of us that try to preserve history in the face of contemporary dynamics that would erase it. This statement, Vayishme'enu ata v'na'asena, is the flip to Na'aseh v'nishma. Na'aseh v'nishma is in Shemot, for the generations going through the experience. We'll do it and then we'll figure it out. This is, if you think about it, for the future generations. Tell us the history. Remind us who we are. Remind us what we are part of so that we can continue it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, is the foundation of what is called positive historical Judaism, founded by Leopold Zunz, which was the false start of the conservative movement at its inception, when it was very much based in halachic roots. This covenant, we continue in the text, is very close to you. It is in your mouth, it is in your heart, so you can fulfill it. Karov elecha hadavar ma'od bepicha u'belavavecha la'asota. We are all, if you will, standing and singing together. Back to the rock concert. We evoke the scene of the past when God is taken on faith. Moshe is gone. Their collective life as a desert people is ending, and they must stand together as a unit in spite of any differences or disagreements amongst them, as we spoke about last year. Netzavim, The answer and instructions for how to do this are biyadecha, in your hand, biyadechem, in your hands. And again, it's interesting, as always, to look at the use of the singular in terms of the unit of the collective versus the plural, acknowledging the individuals. Netzavim, you are standing, that's plural. But here, and some cases it's singular, and it's interesting to see where it is and where it's plural. For this particular thing, the yishme'enu otavena sena, it's in the plural, which means we all have to do it together, which is the answer to a shevet, to a tribe, to a group that would lead us elsewhere. The way you fight or the way you defend yourself against that is to create your own strong group. Sometimes the message is so close we don't even see it. One of my all-time favorite stories, listen carefully, this is a good one, is told by Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, Zichrono L'Shalom, and makes this point. And some of us will laugh with tears in our eyes. Rabbi Sacks teaches, try to hear his British voice, not my gravelly one when you hear this story. When I was a student at university in the late 1960s, the era of student protests, psychedelic drugs, and the Beatles meditating with the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, a story went and made the rounds. An American Jewish woman in her 60s traveled to North India to see a very celebrated and famous guru. There were huge crowds waiting to see this holy man, but she pushed through, saying that she needed to see him immediately and urgently. Eventually, after weaving through the swaying crowds, she entered the tent and stood in the presence of the master himself. What she said that day has entered the realm of legend. While everyone else was wondering who this woman was, she pointed her finger and said, "Marvin, listen to your mother. Enough already. Come home." Starting in the 60s, Jews made their ways into many religions and cultures, with one notable exception, their own. This is still Rabbi Sacks teaching, the Musar of the story. Yet Judaism has historically had its mystics and meditators, its poets, its philosophers, its holy men and women, its visionaries and prophets. It has often seemed as if the longing we have for spiritual enlightenment is in direct proportion to its distance, its farness, its unfamiliarity. We prefer the far to the near. Moses already foresaw this possibility when he says, "The message is here for you. It is not far from you. It is not in the sea. It is not in the heavens. It is not outside of your grasp." Just like the music of our favorite rock stars run through our heads with ease, so too should these teachings by this point in the narrative. I want to end by pointing to the last pasukim of Parshat Netzavim, which is one of our shortest parshiot. Doti bachem hayom et hashamayim v'et haaretz, and this will be repeated in the beginning of Ha'azinu, our love song. I call upon the heaven and earth as witnesses. I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. You shall choose life, so that your offspring will live. Referring back to the Tochacha of last week. So we see how this thread goes, how this rock concert proceeds. To love the Lord your God, La'ahava et Hashem Elokecha, Lishmoa b'kolo, u'ledivka bo. Listen to God's voice. Cleave to God. Ki hu chayecha v'orach yamecha. This is your life. This is your length of days. L'shevet al ha'adama. To live on the land. Asher nishba Hashem lavotecha la'avraham le'yitzchak ve'yaakov letet lahem. That God swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Rabbi Sacks continues with the seminal lesson from the story that I just shared with you about Marvin, come home. Moses sensed prophetically that in the future, Jews would say that to find inspiration, we have to ascend to the heaven or cross the sea. It is anywhere but here. So it was for much of Israel's history during the First and Second Temple periods. First came the era in which the people were tempted by the gods and the people around them. the Canaanite Baal, the Moabite Chemesh, Marduk, Astarte, and Babylonia. Later in Second Temple times, they were attracted to Hellenism in its Greek or Roman forms. It's a strange phenomenon, best expressed in the memorable line of Groucho Marx, "I don't want to belong to any club that would have me as a member." Jews have long had a tendency to fall in love with a people that do not love them back, and pursue almost any spiritual path so long as it is not their own. But that is debilitating. When great minds leave Judaism, Judaism loses great minds. When those in search of spirituality go elsewhere, Jewish spirituality suffers. And this tends to happen in precisely the paradoxical way that Moshe describes several times in Sefer Devarim. Bottom line, it's all here for us. Just like our favorite songs of our favorite rock stars, even more so, the words of our prayers when we express the singularity of Ribbonu Shel Olam, the words that we repeat every day, the words that we may say once a week, the words that we say only on Chagim, the words that we only say once a year. All of these words, the practices, the brachot that run through our days, the awareness of who we are amongst the throngs, all still here. When Ken and I go to our favorite rock concerts, we dress the way we always dress, modestly. Ken with his kippah on his head, me with clothes that I would wear normally. And while we are standing with the throngs, we are never not aware of who and what we are. All of us continue to stand, Netzavim, both those who were present for Moshe's speech and those of us who are living those words today. Shabbat Shalom. I wish you all a Shana Tova u'metuka, Shana Tova tikatevu v'tichatemu. I wish those of you that go to Slichot a meaningful experience. I hope that Rosh Hashanah provides the opportunity for reflection and consideration of who we all are and who we all can be as the collective. Kulanu Nitzavim. Shabbat Shalom.